My revenge wasn't a bitter toast or a shouted accusation. It was the perfectly timed, resonant C minor chord from my cello, played a continent away, that brought my family's carefully constructed symphony to a crashing halt. But that understanding came later. The prelude to my liberation began in my mother's pristine, white kitchen, a room that always felt more like a sterile laboratory for her social ambitions than the heart of a home. You would just make it awkward for everyone. Margaret's voice was as crisp and cold as the starched linen napkins she was inspecting for some imaginary flaw. Her words didn't carry the heat of anger, but the far more chilling weight of a calm, final judgment. I stood motionless by the marble island, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug for warmth. She was meticulously arranging a bouquet of white peonies, snipping stems with a surgeon's precision. The flowers were, of course, for yet another of my sister Lily's pre-wedding events. "I understand," I replied, my voice deliberately neutral. I had learned long ago that meeting her provocations with emotion was a fatal error. It was like handing a composer the exact notes she wanted to hear to prove her point, Clara. The dramatic one. The overly sensitive one. The one who was simply too much. My name is Clara, and I am 28 years old. For the past decade, I have poured my life, my soul, into the polished wood and taut strings of my cello. I am a soloist with the Oregon Symphony. A life I carved out for myself through thousands of hours of relentless practice, auditions that shredded my nerves, and a passion that often felt like a madness. It was a life of discipline and raw emotion, of translating the complex language of long-dead composers for a modern audience. The reason for this conversation, this casual banishment, was Lily's wedding. At 25, Lily was, and had always been, the family's adagio movement, gentle, pleasing, and perfectly in tempo with our parents' expectations. She was marrying a man they approved of, in a grand, traditional ceremony at the city's most exclusive country club, a wedding that had become my mother's magnum opus. I had played at hundreds of weddings, the resonant voice of my cello, accompanying countless couples on their happiest day. Now, I was being told I would not even be a guest at my own sister's. "Good," Margaret said, her attention fixed on the symmetry of her floral arrangement. "Lily's day needs to be flawless. And you know how you can be. How I can be." It was her favorite refrain. A neat, dismissive summary for any quality of mine that threatened to pull focus from Lily. I remembered Lily's 10th birthday, when my gift of a rare, illustrated book was deemed too intellectual and made her other gifts seem plain. I remembered the holiday dinner where a story about my first European tour was cut short because it was taking up too much of the conversation. It meant being too tall. My height, making Lily look diminutive in family photos. It meant being too successful. My concert reviews a herring counterpoint to Lily's Keter. More domestic life. It meant being too visible. Too audible. "The guest list is incredibly tight," she continued, finally gracing me with a glance from her pale, assessing eyes. Lily wanted to invite more of her friends from the charity league, and the country club is very strict about their numbers. It was a lie, and we both knew it. This wasn't about fire codes. It was about narrative control. The unspoken rule was that only one daughter could occupy the spotlight, and my light was deemed too harsh for the soft, diffused glow they required for Lily. "When is the wedding again?" I asked, though the date was seared into my memory. "November 18th, she answered, her voice softening as it always did when she spoke of Lily's perfectly curated life. "The ceremony is at 5. Lily will look like an angel. Her fiancé's mother is loaning her a diamond tiara that's been in their family for a century." November 18th. I filed the date away. A cold, hard stone of an idea beginning to form in my mind. "It sounds lovely," I said, and to my own surprise, I meant it. My issue was never with Lily herself, but with the suffocating dynamic our parents had engineered. My phone vibrated on the counter. A message from Marcus. Just left the site meeting. The foundation plans are approved. We're building something solid. All good for our Italian project. A genuine smile touched my lips. A warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Perfect timing. I typed back. Just confirming my schedule is wide open in November. Marcus was my foundation. An architect I'd met 2 years ago when he designed the concert hall I was performing in. I remembered seeing him in the audience during a rehearsal. His focus not on me, but on the way the sound from my cello filled the space he had created. He understood that structure and art were not separate things, but partners in creating beauty. My family, in the 2 brief times they'd met him, saw only a man with calloused hands and blueprints under his arm. They could not comprehend a life built on something as intangible as art or as bold as his designs. The club's orchestra will be playing. Of course, Margaret said, pulling me from my thoughts. Very classic. Pachelbel's canon. Vivaldi. Nothing too dramatic. Nothing like my repertoire, which was filled with the raw, melancholic passion of Bach's cello suites and the turbulent emotion of Shostakovich. My music was not background noise. It demanded to be felt. She studied my face, searching for the crack in my composure. The telltale sign of a brewing storm. You're taking this surprisingly well. Why wouldn't I? I replied, placing my empty mug in the sink. Lily deserves a perfect day, with the people she wants there. My placid agreement seemed to unnerve her more than any argument could have. She had been braced for a fight, for the emotional outburst she both expected and condemned. My calm was a discordant note in the symphony she was trying to conduct. Well, good, she stammered, turning back to her flowers with a frustrated flick of a fern. I have to go, I said, walking towards the door. Rehearsal in an hour. Another concert, she asked, the dismissal evident in her tone. Yes, I replied, pausing at the door. A very special performance. Actually, I'm working on a new piece. That evening, I sat with Marcus in his studio, surrounded by blueprints and architectural models. A city of dreams waiting to be built. We had a laptop open on the table between us, displaying images of a sun-drenched vineyard in Tuscany. He scrolled to an email from the owner. Listen to this, he said, his voice alive with the excitement of a plan coming together. Signor Costello says the autumn light in the vineyard is poetica. He says the air is crisp. The olive harvest is finishing, and the vines turn a beautiful gold. He assures me it is the perfect stage for a ceremony of the heart. I thought of my mother's cold kitchen, of the life that had been designed to keep me in the background. Are you absolutely sure about this? Clara Marcus asked, his gaze serious, searching mine. It's a bold move. There will be fallout. I looked at the pictures of the ancient, romantic vineyard, and then at the man who saw all of me and was not for 1 second intimidated. The man who wanted to build a life with me, not around me. A life of passion and substance, not of quiet, polite arrangements. I've never been more sure of anything. I said, it's time I composed my own music. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in covert operations. By day, I was the dutiful daughter, a silent attendee at the Sunday dinners that had become war rooms for planning Lily's wedding. The conversations were a dizzying spiral of logistical minutiae, each detail more opulent than the last. I listened to endless debates about the shade of cream for the tablecloths, the vintage of the champagne, and the logistical nightmare of transporting a 5-foot ice sculpture of a swan to the country club. During one such dinner, Margaret spent 20 minutes praising Lily's fiancé, a junior partner at a wealth management firm. It's just so reassuring, she said, beaming at Lily, to know you'll be with someone so stable, so grounded, a man with a clear, predictable path. The unspoken comparison to Marcus, an architect whose life was a series of ambitious, risky projects, hung heavy in the air. I saw him not as unpredictable, but as a creator, a builder of tangible beauty. My mother saw only instability. I would just nod and offer vague, supportive comments, my mind 1,000 miles away, picturing the rustic simplicity of a Tuscan vineyard. Just don't post too much on social media during Lily's wedding weekend, Margaret instructed one evening, not looking up from her plate. We don't want it to look like you're trying to upstage her. Lily, who had been pushing a piece of asparagus around her plate, finally looked up. Her voice was quiet but clear. Mom, Clara can post whatever she wants. It's her life. A sudden, sharp silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat and took a sudden interest in his wineglass. Margaret's smile froze on her face as she turned a glacial gaze on her favored daughter. It was rare for Lily to push back, to create even a minor dissonance in the family harmony. I shot my sister a surprised, grateful look. A flicker of guilt passed through me. She was trying, in her own small way, to defend my space. All while I was planning an event that would inevitably eclipse hers. Across the table, her eyes met mine, and I saw a familiar sadness in them, a longing for the easy closeness we'd shared as children. Before our designated roles as the artistic one and the pretty one had been assigned and rigidly enforced. I just think everyone should have their moment. Lily finished quietly, her courage faltering under our mother's stare. She retreated back to the safety of her dinner. Margaret's lips thinned, but she let it go, launching instead into a monologue about the calligrapher she'd hired for the invitations. My nights were a different story. They were filled with hushed, excited video calls with Marcus and Signore Costello. We spoke of wine pairings instead of seating charts, of ancient olive groves instead of ice sculptures. Signor Costello was more than a venue owner. He was a co-conspirator in our romantic rebellion. He sent us videos of the vineyard, the rows of vines heavy with Sangiovese grapes, the old stone farmhouse bathed in a golden, almost holy light. His passion was infectious, and it solidified our resolve. The first tremor, the sign that our secret symphony was about to be discovered, came from an unexpected source. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the wedding. I was in the middle of a difficult passage from a Brahms sonata when my phone rang. It was Lily, her voice strained with a poorly concealed panic. Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. My bow slipped on the string, creating a harsh, ugly sound. I put my cello on its stand, a sense of dread tightening in my chest. What is it? Lily, you sound upset. Are you planning on getting married in Italy? The question hung in the air. The silence stretched, filled only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. We had been so careful. What makes you ask something like that? I asked, my voice a fraction too calm. Because, she took a shaky breath. Mom's friend Susan has a niece who works at the Italian consulate here. She saw your name, and Marcus's, on a marriage license application for the Siena region. She recognized your name from your symphony concerts. She told Susan, who just called Mom. Clara. She's not okay. She's screaming. My blood ran cold. The bureaucracy. Of all the things we'd planned for, the one thing I hadn't considered was the mundane, traceable paper trail of international law. The foundation of our secret plan had been exposed by idle gossip. Is it true? Lily pressed, her voice cracking. Are you getting married on my wedding day? There was no point in denying it. Yes, I said quietly. We are. The sob on the other end of the line was a gut punch, and it was just the beginning. The next call was from Margaret, a torrent of furious, wounded accusations that I let go to voicemail. Then my father, his disappointment, a heavy, suffocating blanket. But it was the second call from my mother, an hour later, that showed me the true depth of her rage. Signor Costello just called me, she said the moment I answered, her voice trembling with a fury that was terrifying to behold. He received a call from a woman claiming to be my assistant, informing him that your wedding was canceled due to a sudden and tragic family emergency. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't speak. I had anticipated anger, guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail, but I had never, in my wildest dreams, anticipated active sabotage. She had tried to burn my dream to the ground. "Mom, what did you do?" "I did what was necessary to protect your sister," she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound. "You were going to ruin her day out of spite, and I would not allow it. This is what happens when you are selfish. Clara, this is what you force me to do." For a moment, I was paralyzed with a white-hot fury. This was a new low, a violation so profound it broke through years of practiced composure. She was trying to erase me. The fear that my dream was lost warred with a flash of guilt. Had I pushed her to this, but both were consumed by a wave of cold. Hard resolve. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life, hanging up on my mother's tirade. My hands shaking, I immediately called the vineyard. "Signor Costello," I said, my voice tight. "It's Clara. The woman who called you. She was not my assistant. It was a lie. We are not canceling." There was a warm chuckle on the other end of the line. "My dear girl." I suspected as much. She did not sound like someone who appreciates good art. A woman who books a wedding at my vineyard does not have such a shrill voice. His calm, unwavering belief in me was a balm on my frayed nerves. To prevent any further confusion, I said, an idea crystallizing in my mind. "I'd like to wire you the remaining balance for the venue immediately. A non-refundable payment in full." It was a drastic financial move, locking us in completely. But it was necessary. It was a shield against her poison. "An excellent idea," he said. "A fortress of finance against the barbarian hordes of family." As I opened my banking app, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed in the large sum, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I watched the number, a significant portion of my savings, hover on the screen. I hit confirm. The finality of it was breathtaking. I felt a pang of guilt for the stress and for escalating the war. But it was overshadowed by a powerful sense of clarity. Margaret had meant to destroy my plan. Instead, she had cemented it in stone. She had mistaken my quietness for weakness, my patience for passivity. She had no idea that a cellist's hands, trained for subtlety and grace, could also possess a grip of iron. My declaration of war, signed and sealed by a bank transfer, unleashed a symphony of chaos. The family's reaction was no longer just a series of angry phone calls. It was a coordinated campaign, meticulously conducted by Margaret. My father, the family's gentle peacekeeper, was deployed first. He called with a carefully rehearsed speech about the importance of family unity, the sanctity of a sister's wedding day, and the deep hurt I was causing everyone. It was a masterful performance, full of disappointed sighs and appeals to my better nature. "Clara, your mother is beside herself," he said, his voice heavy with a sorrow that felt both genuine and strategically employed. "She feels you're doing this to punish her, to deliberately inflict pain." "I'm not punishing her," I replied, my voice steady, my grip tightening on the phone. "I'm getting married. She's the one who tried to call my venue and lie to cancel it. That was her choice." There was a long pause on the line, the uncomfortable silence of a man forced to confront a truth he'd rather ignore. "She was overwrought," he finally managed, the excuse sounding weak even to him. "She wasn't thinking clearly. But this escalation, Clara, paying for everything up front, it feels so aggressive, so final." It was defensive. I corrected him. "You can't set a house on fire and then blame the owner for installing a sprinkler system. Dad, you know what she's like. You've watched it my whole life." He sighed again, a sound of pure exhaustion. "I know it's not always easy. But can't you? Just this once. Be the bigger person. For Lily. For Lily. It was always. In the end. For Lily. He had no answer when I remained silent. Next came the barrage from the extended family. My Aunt Carol left a long, rambling voicemail about how Margaret had been inconsolable and how Lily's special time was being tainted by all this negativity. My cousin Mark, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, sent a curt text. Whatever you're trying to prove, you've proved it. Stop hurting your sister. It was a textbook smear campaign, and it was brutally effective. I felt a profound sense of isolation, the weight of my entire family turning against me in a chorus of choreographed disapproval. The most difficult call was from Lily. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. They're canceling the final dress, fitting the final dress. She sobbed into the phone. Mom says she's too distraught to go. She spent all yesterday in bed. She says you've ruined everything. And she can't even look at a wedding dress without feeling sick. Lily, that's not me, I said gently, though my heart ached for her. I could picture her perfectly, caught in the middle, her own happiness being held hostage by our mother's rage. That's her, choosing to act this way. But why did you have to pick the same day, she cried, her voice rising. Out of 365 days, you picked the one day that was supposed to be mine. Don't you see how that looks? Don't you see how that hurts? Because for once in my life is not an afterthought to yours, I said, the words sharper than I intended. I am not required to schedule my happiness in the gaps between your major life events. Your wedding date doesn't reserve the entire planet for you. The truth of the statement, spoken aloud for the first time, was both terrifying and liberating. The final, most dramatic call of the week came on a Friday night. I was seeking refuge in my music, listening to a recording of Jacqueline Dupre playing Elgar's cello concerto, a piece of music so full of raw, heartbreaking emotion. It felt like a direct line to my soul. My phone rang, displaying Margaret's name. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to. I hope you're happy, she began, her voice eerily calm, devoid of the shrieking from our last call. I'm getting there, I replied, bracing myself. I just wanted you to know, she continued, that I was a good musician. I was very, very good. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. I was offered a full scholarship to the Curtis Institute of Music. Did you know that your father and I were already serious? And my parents told me I had to choose a career touring the world or a stable family. They said I couldn't have both. Mom, I didn't know what to say. I chose family. She cut me off, her voice beginning to tremble. I chose your father. I chose to have you and Lily. And I have never, for 1 second, regretted it. But you got to have it all. The career, the travel, the applause. You got the life I was told was impossible. And instead of being grateful for that, you spit on the family that gave you the stability to pursue it. Suddenly, decades of her resentment, her carefully veiled jealousy, her constant need to diminish my accomplishments, all clicked into place. In the background, I could hear music playing faintly. It took me a moment to recognize it through the phone's speaker. It was one of my own recordings, a Bach suite from my debut album, the sound of my own cello, a sound of pure, unapologetic passion, was the backdrop to my mother's confession. For a single, insane moment, as the music swelled, her voice softened. That part, that arpeggio near the end, it's very clean. Your intonation is perfect. It was the closest she had ever come to giving me a direct compliment. But the moment of connection was a fleeting grace note. Her voice hardened again, the fury returning, amplified by that flash of vulnerability. You've made your choice, Clara. I hope your ambition keeps you warm at night. She hung up, I sat in the dark, the sound of my own music filling the silence. The call hadn't been an apology. It had been an abdication. She was releasing me from my role as her daughter. Because I had refused to play the part she had written for me. "Do you want to change the date?" Marcus asked later that night. His voice gentle. He had listened to the whole story. His expression shifting from anger to a deep, quiet understanding. We can call Signore Costello. It's not too late. Your happiness is all that matters." I loved him for asking. For giving me an out I both craved and knew I could not take. To back down now would be to validate everything she believed. It would be admitting that her happiness was more important than mine. "No," I said, my voice firm. "We're not changing a single note." His smile was a relief. A beacon. "Good," he said, "because I have a surprise for you." He turned his laptop around. On the screen was a stunning, hand-drawn architectural rendering. It showed a small, beautifully designed music pavilion, built of warm wood and glass, nestled among the olive trees of Signore Costello's vineyard. "I've been talking with our host," Marcus said. "He loves the idea. He said the acoustics would be magnificent. The glass walls face east, so you can play with the sunrise. We're going to build it. Clara, a place for you, for your music, our foundation." I looked at the drawing, at the promise of a future built on love and art, not on obligation and resentment. The chaos my mother had created was just noise. This, with Marcus, was the music. The 10-hour flight to Florence felt like passing through a liminal space. A silent, pressurized tube separating my old life from the new one I was flying toward. I slept for most of it. A deep, dreamless sleep, as if my body understood the need to shed the exhausting weight of the past weeks. My mother's final words to me at my apartment door, "I want you to know that you are breaking your father's heart," had been intended as a final, crippling blow. But as the plane climbed above the clouds, I found that instead of feeling guilt, I felt a strange lightness. The statement was so perfectly manipulative, so quintessentially Margaret, that it had lost its power to wound. It was merely a confirmation that I was flying in the right direction. Marcus met me at the airport, his presence a calm, solid anchor in the bustling terminal. Seeing him, seeing the easy warmth in his smile that held no agenda or expectation, I felt the tangled knot of family-induced anxiety in my chest finally begin to loosen. The 2-hour drive to the vineyard was a journey into another world. We left the city behind, winding our way through the rolling Tuscan hills. The landscape painted in the soft, golden hues of late autumn. The air through the open window smelled of cypress, damp earth, and something ancient and wild. "How are you?" "Really?" he asked as we drove, his hand resting on mine. "I feel quiet," I said, searching for the right word. "Like I've been in a room with a loud, dissonant orchestra for years, and someone finally just cut the sound. All that's left is peace." Signor Costello met us at the gates of his property, a place that was even more beautiful than the photographs had suggested. He was a man in his late 70s, with a face full of laugh lines and eyes that sparkled with a warm intelligence. "Welcome, my children. Welcome," he boomed, embracing us both as if we were long-lost family. "You have escaped the barbarians now. You are safe. Tonight, we eat. We drink my best Chianti. And we speak only of beautiful things." The villa was a dream of ancient stone and terracotta tiles, warmed by the centuries of sun it had absorbed. It smelled of wood smoke, rosemary, and old leather. Signor Costello served us a simple dinner of pasta with fresh sage, local cheeses, and bread dipped in the olive oil he made from his own trees. We ate on a stone terrace, lit by flickering candles. The vast, starry sky above us, more brilliant than any I had ever seen. My grandfather used to say this land doesn't just grow grapes. It grows stories, he told us, pouring more wine. A wedding is the best kind of story. It is a promise of a beautiful future, written on the pages of the past. I am honored to be a part of yours. The next morning, November 17th, I woke to the sound of a string quartet tuning their instruments in the garden below. I looked out the window and saw them, 3 of my closest friends from the symphony, who had flown in from Oregon, their instrument cases resting on the ancient flagstones. They were laughing with Signore Costello as he showed them the spot where we would be married, a natural alcove formed by 2 ancient, gnarled olive trees. The sight of them, my true ensemble, filled my heart with a quiet, profound joy. "Good morning, my love," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Your orchestra has arrived." Our other guests arrived around noon. His sister, Chloe, with her husband and their 2 young children, who immediately began chasing lizards in the garden, and my friend Liam, a filmmaker who had offered to document the day. Each arrival was a note of warmth and genuine affection, a stark contrast to the performative and obligatory nature of the family gatherings I was used to. Chloe embraced me, her energy infectious. "This place is a fairy tale. I told Marcus that if he messes this up, I'm disowning him and keeping you as my sister." She pulled back, her expression softening. "Seriously, though, how are you holding up with everything? Your family?" "Honestly, I'm better than I've been in years," he admitted. "I think I needed this. The distance, the clarity." "Good," she said, squeezing my hand, "because you deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated." As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, painting the hills in strokes of rose and gold, I felt a profound sense of peace. Liam was capturing footage of the children playing, their laughter echoing through the vineyard. My friends were rehearsing a piece by Bach, the complex, beautiful harmonies drifting on the air. Marcus was deep in conversation with Signor Costello, pointing out architectural details on the old farmhouse. This was my family, not the one I had been born into, but the one I had built. Note by careful note. Liam approached me as I was getting ready in our room, the simple silk gown feeling light as air against my skin. "Just so you know," he said, "my only direction for today is to capture the truth. No poses, no performances, just you, Marcus, and this incredible place. That's all I want." I told him I didn't carry a bouquet. Instead, I carried my cello. As my friends began to play the hauntingly beautiful first notes of the Sarabande from Bach's 5th cello suite, a piece of profound sorrow, but also of transcendent beauty and resilience, I walked down the stone path. When I reached the alcove, I took my place not as a bride walking down an aisle, but as a musician joining her ensemble. I sat, took a deep breath, and joined them, my own cello, adding its voice to the harmony. For a few minutes, we just played. The music, a prayer offered up to the Tuscan sky. Our vows were simple promises, spoken in the warm glow of the lanterns as dusk settled over the vineyard. Marcus, his voice thick with emotion, promised to always be the architect of a space where your music can be free. I promise to always find the harmony in our life together, even when the notes are difficult. Signor Costello, who had become an ordained minister online just for this occasion, pronounced us married with a flourish, declaring that the vineyard had never witnessed a more beautiful harmony. As Marcus kissed me, with the stars beginning to appear in the deep indigo sky, and our chosen family cheering, I felt a fundamental shift inside me, the dissonant chords of my past, the feeling of being too much. The years of quiet apologies for my own existence finally resolved into a new key. I was not the awkward, inconvenient daughter anymore. I was a wife, an artist, a woman who had composed her own happiness, in her own time, on her own terms. The celebration that followed was not a reception, it was a dinner party. We gathered around a long, rustic wooden table on the main terrace, lit by dozens of candles and the string of lanterns that Signor Costello had hung between the trees. The local chef he'd hired prepared a feast of Tuscan specialties, each course more delicious than the last. The wine, from Signore Costello's own cellar, was magnificent. There were no speeches, no cutting of the cake, no forced traditions. There was only the warm murmur of conversation, the easy laughter of friends, and the beautiful, complex harmonies of the string quartet playing softly in the background. "A toast," Liam said, raising his glass, his filmmaker's eye taking in the scene, "to Clara and Marcus, for reminding us all that the most beautiful art is a life well lived." Everyone cheered, glasses clinking. As the evening wore on, a confortable, joyful peace settled over me. This was it. This was the moment of quiet triumph. But the universe, it seemed, had a much grander finale in mind. It began subtly. Liam, who had been editing a short clip from the ceremony on his laptop, let out a low whistle. "Guys, you need to see this." He turned the laptop around. It was a 1-minute video of the moment I sat down to play my cello, seamlessly edited to include shots of Marcus's emotional reaction, the golden sunset, and the ancient beauty of the vineyard. But it was the music, the clear, resonant, deeply emotional sound of the Bach sarabande, recorded with professional microphones that elevated it from a simple wedding video into something else entirely. It was a piece of art. I posted it to my professional Vimeo page about an hour ago. Liam said, a strange look of awe on his face, just to show my network what we were up to. It's being shared. A lot. Before I could process that, my phone, which I'd left untouched on a side table, began to buzz. Then it buzzed again. And again. It was a frantic, insistent vibration that cut through the calm of the evening. I picked it up, my screen alight with notifications, mostly from Instagram, where Liam had also shared the clip. The number of new followers was climbing at a dizzying speed. Then, a call came through. It was Lily. My heart sank. The peace of the evening shattered. "I should take this," I said, my voice tight, walking to a quiet corner of the terrace. "Clara," she began, and her voice was not angry or sad, but a strange, high-pitched mixture of panic and disbelief. "What is happening on the internet?" "What do you mean?" "I mean your wedding music video thing. It's everywhere. My maid of honor just sent it to me. All of my friends are seeing it. People at my wedding are watching it on their phones right now." The blood drained from my face. "At your wedding, Lily? What are you talking about?" "I'm at my reception," she cried, and I could hear the tinny sound of Pachelbel's cannon in the background. "And people are coming up to me, showing me their phones, asking why I didn't tell them my sister had the most beautiful wedding they've ever seen. In Italy. Tonight, a famous music blogger just shared your video. It has 100,000 views. What did you do?" This wasn't supposed to happen. The plan was to keep it private, to share our news quietly, on our own terms. After the fact, the idea of our intimate ceremony invading hers, in real time, was a nightmare. "Lily, I have to go," I stammered. "No. Wait," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Mom knows. Someone showed her the video. She's locked herself in the bridal suite. She's not coming out." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood in the darkness, the distant sound of my own perfect party mingling with the phantom sound of my sister's disintegrating one. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "You have finally destroyed your mother. I hope you're proud." I walked back to the table, my mind spinning. "Our wedding is going viral," I said, the words feeling absurd on my tongue. "Right now. During my sister's reception, the group fell silent. Liam looked horrified. Clara, I am so sorry. I had no idea. It's not your fault, I said, though I wasn't sure who was to blame. I think this was always going to happen. The rest of our time in Sicily was surreal. By the next morning, the video had millions of views on multiple platforms. The cello bride was trending on Twitter. Major news outlets from Good Morning America to the BBC had picked up the story, framing it as a fairy tale romance. A story of an artist choosing authenticity over a traditional family wedding. My social media following exploded. Emails poured in from strangers, from reporters, from brands. But the most significant email came from a name I recognized instantly, Christoph Steiner, the legendary artistic director of the Berlin Philharmonic. He wrote that he had been moved to tears by the video and the raw power of my playing. He wanted to discuss a potential guest soloist performance. It was the kind of opportunity I had only dreamed of. In the midst of this whirlwind, my family remained a wall of wounded silence. The story they heard from the world was one of romantic rebellion, but the story they told themselves was one of betrayal. My beautiful, authentic choice was, in their eyes, a calculated, cruel act of war. And as the world celebrated me, they retreated, leaving me with a success that felt both triumphant and profoundly lonely. The return from Tuscany was like re-entering the Earth's atmosphere after a journey in space. The quiet, golden beauty of the vineyard was replaced by the harsh, clamoring noise of unexpected fame. Back in my quiet Portland apartment, the silence felt different. It was no longer a peaceful refuge, but a hollow, echoing chamber filled with the deafening absence of my family. I'd spend hours scrolling through my own life as if it belonged to someone else. Our wedding video, now simply known online as the cello bride, had become a full-blown cultural phenomenon. It had spawned think pieces in online magazines about the rebellion of modern romance, detailed musical analyses of my Bach performance by critics, and a deluge of reaction videos from crying teenagers to stoic old men who confessed to being moved. My face, Marcus's face, Signor Costello's vineyard, they were everywhere. The professional opportunities that had seemed like a dream in Italy became a concrete, overwhelming reality. The official offer from the Berlin Philharmonic arrived not as an email, but as a thick, cream-colored envelope via international courier. I held the letter, the orchestra's iconic crest embossed at the top, and my hands shook. It was a formal invitation to perform the Elgar Concerto, the very piece I had been listening to on the night of my mother's final, furious phone call. The universe's sense of irony was not subtle. This letter represented the absolute pinnacle of my professional ambitions. A validation so profound, it felt holy. I laid it on my music stand, a tangible symbol of my new life. And yet, my first instinct was to call my mom, to share the news. The instinct died, a swift, painful death as I remembered the wall of silence. Marcus, too, was swept up in the tide. Metropolis, a prestigious architectural magazine, reached out, wanting to do an exclusive feature not on one of his buildings, but on the story and design of the music pavilion he had promised to build for me in Tuscany. They called our story the ultimate expression of bespoke architecture, he told me, a look of amused disbelief on his face. Apparently, designing a structure based on a love story is very in right now. Our shared act of defiance was generating a future more brilliant than either of us could have imagined. Yet it felt like it was happening behind a thick pane of glass. Beautiful and untouchable, this new, bright world was haunted by the cold, silent ghost of my family. I had expected anger, recriminations, drama. What I got was far worse. Nothing. A complete and total freeze-out. I tried calling my father, hoping to appeal to his softer nature, but the calls went straight to voicemail. I sent a carefully worded email, explaining that I never intended to cause pain, only to celebrate my own joy. The email was met with a stark, digital silence. It was as if I had ceased to exist. The first crack in the wall of silence came a month after our return. I was at a coffee shop, trying to compose a reply to Christoph Steiner, when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Clara. It's Lily. I'm using a friend's phone. Mom monitors my calls and texts now. My heart twisted with a mix of pity and alarm. The idea of my mother policing her 2 5-year-old daughter's phone was horrifying. Is everything okay? No, not really. I just wanted to ask you something. I've been reading the articles, the comments. They keep calling your wedding authentic. What does that make mine? Was my wedding a lie? The question was so full of genuine, painful confusion that it hurt to read. For her, authentic was not a concept that had ever been applied to life choices. Life choices were about being appropriate, impressive, correct. It doesn't make your wedding anything other than yours. Lily. I typed back, choosing my words with care. It was beautiful. And it was what you and Mom planned for months. But did I want it? The reply came instantly. Or was I just told I wanted it? I see your video. Clara. I've watched it maybe 100 times. I see the look on your face when you're playing. When you're looking at Marcus. I didn't have that. My face, in my wedding photos, was the one Mom told me to have for the photographer. This was the last thing I had expected. My act of self-liberation had inadvertently shattered my sister's beautifully constructed reality. I had been so focused on my own freedom that I hadn't considered the blast radius. My escape had left my sister alone in the prison I had fled. Now suddenly aware of the bars, I didn't know how to respond. The conversation was cut short by another text. I have to go. She's coming. Don't text this number again. The interaction left me deeply unsettled. A few weeks later, Marcus and I were invited to be interviewed for a national arts program. The host was a sharp, intelligent woman who had done her research. I spent the days leading up to it in a state of low-grade panic. This would be the first time I would have to speak about it all on a major platform. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, Marcus said, squeezing my hand in the green room before the show. This is your story. You decide how it gets told. Halfway through the interview, after discussing my music and the Berlin invitation, the host shifted gears. The narrative that has captured the public's imagination, she said, her gaze both sympathetic and probing, is this idea of choosing your art, choosing your own life. In the face of family opposition, there's been speculation. Of course. Can you speak to that? I felt a familiar cold dread. But then I thought of Lily's text. I thought of my father's silence and my mother's sabotage. My story was already out there, twisted into 1,000 different shapes by strangers. It was time I owned it. I looked at Marcus, and he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Your stage, your music. I come from a family that has a very clear, very beautiful idea of what a good life should look like. I began carefully. My sister, who is a wonderful person, fits into that picture perfectly. Do not. My life. My career. My personality. It's a different key. A different tempo. And my presence at her wedding was seen as a dissonant chord in their perfect symphony. So, I was asked not to attend. The host's eyes widened slightly. The studio fell silent. You were uninvited from your own sister's wedding. Yes, I said. The simple word, landing, with a quiet finality in the hushed room. And while that was deeply painful, it was also a gift. It gave me the freedom to stop trying to blend into a piece of music that was never written for me. It gave me the permission to compose my own symphony, with the people who truly wanted to be in the orchestra. The interview was broadcast a week later. The dissonant chord metaphor was quoted everywhere. The story shifted from a simple romantic fairy tale to something more complex. A story of emotional abuse and artistic triumph. The public support for me intensified, and with it, the implicit condemnation of my family. I had not intended to shame them publicly, but by telling my own truth, I had inadvertently cast them as the villains in a story the world was now watching. It was a victory that tasted terrifyingly like cruelty. The success of the interview, and the public's embrace of the dissonant chord narrative, acted as a powerful accelerant. What followed was not a gradual rise, but a vertical ascent into a life I hadn't dared to imagine. The director, Liam, was approached by a producer from a major documentary streaming service, Luminance Docs, who had seen the interview and was captivated by the story. They didn't just want to license his wedding footage, they wanted to fund a full-length feature film. They want to call it The Dissonant Chord. Liam explained to Marcus and me over coffee a week later. We were sitting in a cafe, but it felt like a boardroom. They see it as a cultural touchstone. They want to use our wedding as the central pillar to explore a bigger idea, the generational shift in what people value in life's biggest milestones. What would that involve for us? Marcus asked, his architect's mind immediately focusing on the structural details. Interviews. The producer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Anya, explained. With you, Clara, with Marcus, with your friends who were there. They want to send a small crew to Tuscany to interview Signor Costello, to capture the magic of the vineyard. And she paused, looking at me carefully. They want to interview other couples who have been inspired by your story. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. It meant laying my life, my pain, and my family's dysfunction bare for the world to dissect. I felt a familiar wave of guilt and fear. I don't want this to be an attack on my family, I said quietly. It won't be, Anya assured me. It will be an exploration of your choice. It's a story about courage, not revenge. We agreed. The next few months were a blur of production. We sat for hours of interviews, recounting our story in painstaking detail. The process was cathartic, like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. We watched as Anya's team masterfully wove our narrative with the stories of others. There was a couple from Ohio who had canceled their 300-person ballroom reception and used the money to build a school in Guatemala. There was a same-sex couple from Texas who, after seeing our video, decided to have a small, defiant ceremony in their own backyard after their families had refused to support them. Watching the rough cuts, I saw that Anya was right. This was bigger than my story. It was about a universal human desire to live an authentic life. The filmmakers reached out to my family. As expected, Margaret declined with a curt, no comment, and my father stated it was a private family matter, to my utter shock. However, Lily agreed to be interviewed. I wasn't allowed to see her footage until the premiere. We attended the film festival in a daze, walking a red carpet. The flashbulbs of cameras a strange, popping counterpoint to the quiet intimacy of the story we had lived. We sat in the dark theater, my hand gripping Marcus's so tightly, my knuckles were white. And then, Lily appeared on the giant screen. She looked elegant but fragile. She spoke of our childhood, of the treehouse in our backyard, where we'd whisper secrets, of the genuine love that had existed between us before the pressure to compete had poisoned it. She spoke of her own wedding, her voice thick with a complex mixture of pride and a new, dawning sadness. I had the wedding my mother always dreamed of, she said, her eyes glistening as she looked directly into the camera. It was perfect, every detail. But watching Clara's video, in that 1 minute, I saw more joy on her face than I felt during my entire 8-hour reception. I realized her wedding was a story, and mine was a production. She took a shaky breath. I don't know if I'll ever be as brave as her, to choose the story over the production, but I hope I will be. I want to be. In the silent theater, I began to cry, not tears of sadness, but of a profound, complicated relief. Her words were a gift, a public offering of peace and understanding that I had never expected. It was the first true note of reconciliation in a lifetime of dissonance. The dissonant chord became a global sensation. The documentary won awards at film festivals and was picked up by Netflix, shattering streaming records. Its success propelled my career into the stratosphere. The Berlin Philharmonic performance was a sold-out triumph. The encore, a solo rendition of the Bach Sarabande from my wedding, which I dedicated to all the other dissonant chords. The performance was broadcast live and led to a multi-album record deal with a prestigious classical label. My first album, Tuscany, was a collection of pieces inspired by our journey, and it won a Grammy. A year after the wedding, life had a rhythm that was both peaceful and exhilarating. We bought a home in Portland, a beautiful modern structure designed by Marcus, with a soundproofed studio for me that had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a forest. The Grammy sat on the mantelpiece, not as a trophy, but as a quiet reminder of what was possible when I listened to my own music. Marcus and I started a foundation, using the money we earned from the film to provide scholarships for young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds who dared to play in a different key. We built the Music Pavilion in Tuscany, a beautiful structure of glass and cedar, and we returned every year for our anniversary. For a quiet week of making music and drinking wine with Signore Costello, but my family never came back. The silence from my parents became permanent, a solid, unbreachable wall. I learned through the grapevine that they had sold their house in Portland and moved to a retirement community in Arizona. A final, geographical severing of ties. Their absence was a dull ache, a phantom limb that sometimes tingled with a memory of what could have been, but it was no longer a gaping wound. After her interview, Lily and I began a slow, fragile process of rebuilding. We started with tentative texts, which grew into long, late-night phone calls. A year after the wedding, she left her husband, a man she admitted she had married more to please our mother than herself, and moved to New York to get a master's degree in art history, a passion she had long suppressed. I visited her in her tiny, pretty, book-filled apartment in Brooklyn. I'm trying to figure out what my own story is, she told me over coffee. Not the one that was written for me. She looked happier, more alive than I had ever seen her. Our relationship wasn't what it had been in our childhood treehouse. We were different people now, marked by the symphony of chaos we had survived. But it was real. It was authentic. I never got the apology I once craved from my parents. I never got the happy, blended family I saw in holiday movies. But I got something far more valuable. I got a life that was authentically mine, built on the foundations of a love that was strong enough to withstand the chaos. I got a career that was the direct result of choosing my own music over the noise of expectation. And I got my sister back, sitting in my new studio, my cello resting against my shoulder. I looked out at the quiet forest. I often thought about the price of my happiness. It was high. It had cost me my first family. But in the end, the peace that came from living an authentic life, a life played in my own key, was priceless. If our story has resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make a difficult choice to be true to yourself, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. Your stories inspire us every day. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more conversations about living an authentic life.